when God takes you out of that season to where you're in between a rock and a hard place, and he brings you into that season of bliss and peace, do not forget him. And the reason why I say do not forget him is because God is going to take away the pain, right? He's going to take away the thought, the memory of the pain that you went through, right? And when God does that, it can cause you to not remember all that he did for you, right? It's very similar to birth, right? I can assume that when you give birth, after you have that child, you know the pain of pregnancy, you know the pain of, anywho, you know the pain of labor, you know the pain of contractions. But once you have that child, when that is released, and the child is here and is born, and you got through that hard place, you tend to forget how bad it actually was. And I think about, for those who don't know, I've had a miscarriage before, and the physical pain that you feel when you go through a miscarriage feels very similar to what I assume would be pregnancy, right? When the fetus was coming out, I went through a lot of contraction-like cramps, and they were horrible. They were horrible. And I remember being in the season, and God was just like, remember this feeling, right? Remember that feeling. And I will always say, like, once I got out of it, I was like, okay, that was bad, but I feel like if this is what I have to go through to get, to have a child, I don't feel like it would be that bad, right? It was bad. Don't get me wrong. It was horrible. That feeling, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But if I have to go through that in order to have a child, I know that I can get through it, right? So like I was saying, I say all this to say, just like child labor, when you have your child, you tend to forget what all the pain that you went through, right? And when God finally takes you out of that hard place, you might have had all these thoughts of the past. You might have had, a lot of spiritual warfare. You might have had sleepless nights, right? Physical problems with your body. You might have had all these people attacking you every which way. And your enemy could have been your mind, right? Because it kept going back to the past, kept going back to who you used to be, kept going back to your past mistakes, kept going back to past people. And when God pulls you out of that, the memory of it kind of goes away. Another example, very similar to like your first love, right? Most people that have like a first love in middle school, they don't really love that person anymore in that way, right? They don't really, they're not attracted to that person in that way anymore. It's kind of just like, oh, puppy love, that's just a distant memory. That's kind of how it's going to be. Sooner or later, the pain that you're enduring right now is going to be a distant memory. You're not even going to feel it, right? You know it. When you think about it, you remember. But you're not going to remember the feeling, right? You know that it happened, but you're not going to remember the feeling. It's going to be very hard to try to grab that feeling back. And that's for a reason, right? God doesn't want you to remember the former things. He doesn't want you to feel that, right? You're going through enough. Especially if you're in a season of wilderness season or a testing season. You're going through enough with the fire. So when he takes you out of the fire, you're not going to feel the burning anymore. You know that you were burnt in that fire. You know that you're going through that burning. But you're not going to feel the burn anymore. And sometimes that's scary because now you really have to fight to keep God close, right? You do. Because when you're out of that fire, his voice isn't as present. His direction doesn't seem as clear because he's not voicing what he wants, right? It's kind of just in you. You just know because you got out of the fire, right? You're reborn again and he saved you from it. So, like I said, this is probably all over the place. I got a little sidetracked, but don't forget the Lord when he gives you that thing, because it can be easy to forget him because he's going to take away all that pain and suffering and the memory of the pain and suffering. And you have to remember all that he got you through, right? You have to remember everything that he got you through. Think of every situation where you say, God, help me. Please help me out of this. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. And he did it. Remember what you went through. Remember how hard it was for you. Remember how you felt like you couldn't get out of it. And that's how you're going to continue to follow the Lord and continue to keep him first, is to remember that feeling, because you're not going to feel the feeling anymore.